You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Barbell Logic Beast Over Burden. So happy to be with you today. I'm your host, Niki Sims. With me is probably your favorite host, Andrew Jackson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Highly caffeinated and ready for the weekend. Masters
what weekend is it? Yes, Masters.
Round one is today on recording day. So by the time this comes out, it'll be over. We'll know who the winner is. But I'm ready to sit on the couch and watch golf.
I just want to watch these athletes perform. I'm excited about it.
Athletes, yes.
They are so impressive. I'm so impressed by golfers, just for the record, especially with this tournament. And Tiger Woods is playing. Hopefully he makes it through the tournament. I know he hasn't made it through a full tournament in a bit. So Let's see what turns out.
So what are we talking about today?
Muscles. We're talking about muscles today, as we like to do. You were sent an article. You were sent the original article from the magazine called Outside. And this article headline has the answer to everything you've always been searching for out there on the internet of muscle.
Indeed. Yes. Shout out to Scott G for hitting me up on Instagram. This one's for you, bud. He forwarded me a screenshot from the gram from Outside Magazine under the sweat science category. To build muscle, the headline says, it's the sets that count. Short workouts can make you stronger, but longer workouts are better for building muscle, according to new research.
Wow, that is mega right there. That
big claim.
Big claim. Big claim. And something we'd like to do today is be your funnel of truth. And that is a phrase I'm stealing from our brand manager, Paige Miller. She does our social media, and one of our directions for the content we put out is helping you distill everything that's out there. We want to be your funnel of truth. So let's break this article down.
Sure. Yeah, there's things that this topic touches on that are near and dear to my heart because I consider myself an engineer by training. I have never professionally been an engineer, but did a lot of math and science growing up. And I'm always interested in the research, quote unquote, the science, capital T, capital S. And there's often in modern strength lifting communities, a lot of debate about what the science says.
What makes the Instagram go around.
What the literature says. And what's been interesting over the years as I've paid more attention to it, as evidence-based coaching has become really
Some people have put their entire business on this.
And make all of their arguments based on their ability to quote PubMed studies or the number of studies that they can recall off the top of their head. And that if you can't match them study for study or be fluent in all of the latest studies that have been released, then somehow you're inferior in your understanding how things work. And so I've taken it upon myself to actually pull the studies up and read as many as I can, or at least the ones that catch headlines like this, because people ask me about them.
And then they will start acting upon them.
Right. And because people want to believe things that are scientifically proven, quote unquote.
I also want to know what works. And when there's the word science thrown into it, when there's the word evidence thrown into it, they trust it more. There's more trust.
Yeah, there's decent reason to believe that. And I think there are examples of that being true, that things that have been studied and that conclusions have changed based on studies where bro science, as it's sort of demeaningly referred to, has been shown to not really be true, or at least the model is refined based on studies that are done. The dark side of that, though, is that people will take a headline like this and the study is referenced, but no real critical thinking has gone into looking at the study, to deciding whether it's applicable to you, or really trying to figure out how it influences your mental model. And where I've personally evolved to in my coaching practice and the way I think about studies that come out or new information comes to light is that I have mental models. I think we all, as human beings, have mental models for how the world works. Training is one of them. And a mental model is simply a framework for making decisions based on the input that you receive about whatever the scenario is and taking action. So I have mental models for training and for my programming based on coaching hundreds of clients over a decade. My personal training, nutrition, science feeds into that. I do look at studies and I use that as an input, but I have a mental model for how things work. When you put certain things into your training, that you will get certain outputs on average. Huge asterisk and caveat that individual variation tends to be more of a factor than, within group variation. Meaning that if you take some population, which all of these studies do, is take some number of people, test a hypothesis, and determine whether there's statistically significant change that supports or rejects the hypothesis. So problem number one right out of the gate is, even if you have a statistically significant result, it's probably small. And within that, there were some people that did not have a result that supported the conclusion.
And isn't the fun thing about statistics is you can toggle the data however you want to make something appear more significant or not?
I wouldn't quite go that far. You can certainly change data significantly, and that's a whole nother subject with studies that has come to light over the last few years. Is reproducibility is a huge problem. That there's an extremely low number of studies that are reproducible.
Right.
And so the quality of the results in the data is extremely questionable.
Yeah.
Especially when you're dealing with humans.
Yeah.
It's so complex. It's very different when you're talking about studying physics and some physical property of the universe versus trying to isolate a variable within a human, like training, where you are making the assumption that you're actually able to control the variables throughout some period of time, like 10 weeks in a lot of cases.
I mean, can one person even duplicate their own life for 10 weeks?
Exactly.
And live your life for 10 weeks, live the same life the next 10 weeks.
Right. Let alone 85 different people.
Right.
Where you've got nutrition. I mean, we even know within training, how many of your clients are able to string together 10 weeks of training with consistency in all aspects of their life?
A small handful.
I would
and
say
that's okay.
Almost zero.
It's a human way.
This isn't to say we just throw our hands up and we don't try to do it. It's just that the weight that I place on a headline based on a study, based on a population of people doing one exercise for 10 weeks is very low. I'm not going to completely restructure my mental model or my coaching practice or my understanding of how the universe works because of an Outside Magazine headline based on 11 different variables.
And Outside Magazine is a business. Businesses like to make money.
Right. That's also not to say that there might not be some merit. That was probably too many double negatives there, but there may still be merit in the study and some kernel of truth in the article. But to summarize it by saying to build muscle, it's the sets that count. Longer workouts are better for building muscle.
It requires a deeper dive.
Yeah.
Yeah. They speak like it's the truth.
Right.
But smartly so, you and many other members of our team tend to, want to go further into these studies.
Right.
Where it's like, okay, let's see what you're really trying to say here. Let's see what the study actually looked like. Does this need to change or inform my mental model?
Right.
And also, does it prepare you for conversations with your clients?
I'll get questions from my clients or from people following me. It comes up in conversation. A magazine. I mean, Outside Magazine is in every airport, every newsstand, and people will see the headline and ask a question about that. So whether you're a coach or a client, this might be of interest to you. So shall we dive in?
Let us dive.
So just a little bit of backstory on this study.
Can you read the headline one more time?
From the Outside Magazine?
Yeah.
To build muscle, it's the sets that count. Subtitle, short workouts can make you stronger, but longer workouts are better for building muscle, according to new research. A lot of assumptions in there.
Also, it seems like the first part of the sentence and the second part of the sentence don't connect, where it's like, wait, aren't strength and muscle really related? You're saying that they're not as related as we thought they might be?
Well, they're pulling that because of results from the study,
Yeah.
which we'll get into, but
Yeah.
that essentially the 1-set team showed more strength increases than the 4-set team or leg, but we'll get into that.
Spoilers. Sorry.
Yeah. Now, anyways, basic idea, they took 85 elder bros and brolettes. All participants. There are a few things that are actually interesting to me about this study. Number one, all participants were over 60 years old, male and female.
Bros and bras.
Yeah. Bros and bras. There were 27, it was almost 50-50, 27 male, 24 female.
Okay.
Interestingly, they all had this, they were all within 72.2 kilograms plus or minus 12 kilograms. So male and female all basically weighed the same, all basically within 5 years old, the same age. So it was actually overall 60, average age 69 plus or minus 5 years.
And in that age group, I bet a lot of them actually had the same haircuts, like the males and the females.
72.2 kilos. So these are 158, both men and women, plus or minus 13 kilos. So they're, between 120 to 170 pounds. Okay, reasonable. All eating about 2,000 calories a day, plus or minus 600. So they're calling that statistically the same.
Interesting.
So yeah, you have everybody eating somewhere between 1,500-ish, 1,400 calories to maybe 2,700 calories.
Wow.
1.6 gram per kilogram per day protein intake.
That's a good amount of protein.
115 grams of protein.
Oh, well,
Probably not.
if they're on the lower weight range there.
Probably not. Well, I would argue for a elder bro and brolette population, not an optimal amount of protein.
Yeah.
And so some interesting data there, just kind of breakdown of the participants. They screened almost 200 people to get down to 85 for the actual experiment. Now, the second interesting thing about this experiment that I thought was actually pretty cool is that they eliminated the individual variation. So this is normally a variable that I find to be a problem with studies, is that they'll take 85 people and compare the results of 85 people to evaluate this hypothesis when the difference, like we talked about, the variation between one person to the next is probably going to be greater of a variable than...
Especially at this age, like they've each had 60 different years of life before they got to this point.
Right. Now, in this case, though, they tested the hypothesis of a 1-set versus a 4-set training protocol with unilateral leg extension, single leg extension on the same person. So they had...
So cool.
I like the visual. This is sort of like a Trogdor, one arm just totally jacked.
Yes.
I'm just imagining these 60-year-olds.
Okay, let's give them a big muscly arm. Yeah.
A bunch of grandparents walking around. One leg is just totally jacked. Anyways.
That must have been the 4-set group.
So they had these 85 people do one protocol on one leg and the other protocol on the other leg, so they could eliminate, in theory, this individual variation and say, well, look at the results for this individual who did on one leg, the 1-set, and the other leg.
So there was no control.
Well, they tried to control the diet. They tried to control the, training protocol. They also eliminated a bunch of people for health conditions or any drugs with potential anabolic effects. So basically no TRT people.
Okay. So you were going on about
the protocol.
Yeah, the protocol for one leg.
So so they had one leg do 4 sets, the other leg do 1 set.
And so the only exercise utilized was the leg extension?
Single leg extension. And they did a MRI cross-sectional area and a 1RM test before and after. They had them basically come in to the gym and do a training session, like a practice session for their initial, this is how you do a leg extension. And then 72 hours later, they had to come back and do the actual test.
They probably had to recover a lot from that 1RM.
Well, exactly. They wanted to make sure there was plenty of time. So they picked the low skill movement, gave them some amount of coaching, gave them 72 hours off, come back, now give me your max 1RM. And then they did the MRI, and that was their baseline.
Okay.
So then they had them do a 10-week resistance training program, 2 sessions a week, one leg getting 1 set, the other leg getting 4 sets. And then they repeated the 1RM test. Oh, I should specify, they did between 8 to 15 reps for these sets to failure. So an exercise scientist standing next to grandma,
1,
screaming at them.
2, 3. I'm going to start counting down now. 9.
Oh
8,
my God.
7.
So going back to our podcast last week, like, it must be hard. Can you imagine giving a 70-year-old 4 sets of 2 failure leg extensions at 8 to 15 reps? Like, how, anyways,
Yeah.
go listen to our last podcast about our thoughts on how effective that type of training is going to be. But anybody who's out there that's ever done relatively high rep, 8 to 15 reps of a leg extension, I'm going to call it understandable that they chose that because it's a low skill controllable exercise.
Yeah.
But to say that that's a productive way to train a elderly, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, an older person to maximize strength and hypertrophy, I would not call that the most effective.
I don't think they're arguing that. But yeah, it is you can control the movement.
Exactly.
And the weight really well.
Fair point.
If you just keep to the study that we're looking at.
Right. But I guess my point there is when you want to take away something that you want to apply to your mental model, we're not talking about 3 to 5 rep RM, 3 sets of 5 compound movements where, if you read the headline that says more sets is better, and you're like, well, I guess I better be doing 8 sets of 5 instead of 3 sets of 5 because the headline and the research says more sets is better. So I'm going to get more jacked if I do 8 sets of 5.
And they're really saying 4 sets of 15 is better than 1 set of 8.
8 to 15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay.
Right.
Anyway, carry on.
Again, to your point, I'm not even going to judge the fact that they did that. It's just keep that in mind when you're trying to apply that to your own training.
Yes. I shall.
So then they had him do that for 10 weeks and took another MRI and did another 1RM. And interestingly, what they found was, and this is why the subset article exists, that the 1 set group actually did better on the 1RM test than the 4 set.
That's amazing.
There's slightly better results for the 1RM. However, the cross-sectional analysis had slightly better results for the volume group. This is why the subset says. Now,
it's a subtitle. Okay.
Yeah, subtitle. One could probably assume the single set group was doing heavier leg extensions because they only had to do 1 instead of 4. I didn't dig into it. I should have said here, let's say the smallest load adjustments were 1 kilogram. Participants performed each set to concentric muscle failure.
How many times a week were they doing this?
This is twice a week.
Okay.
So yeah, their conclusions came out. Now, the other thing that I would want to point out is the statistical significance of the results. Pretty dang small. I mean, we're talking about, it's only 10 weeks. So, I mean, you are getting some newbie gains also. So take that into account when you're thinking about applying this to your mental model. We're talking about noobs.
And also, even a leg extension, there's a little bit of a learning curve that you master maybe in like two weeks. You kind of get a feel for how to utilize leverage and how to recruit more. So I have to wonder if their 1RM would have gone up in the 2nd week.
Right, if they just stopped the test there.
Yeah.
Yeah. They did sort of modify the training. Actually, during the first 2 weeks, participants performed all sets within 12 to 15 reps. And then the 3rd week onward, it was 8 to 12.
So they periodized. Wow.
So they were even higher volume.
All roads lead to block.
For the first 2 weeks. Oh, and then this is what I was looking for. They did adjust in session. So if they were above the target repetitions range, then they increased the weight for the next set.
Get to failure.
So they were always trying to like titrate into failure with the smallest increment of 1 kilogram made. So the statistical analysis is the other piece that you want to take. I should also clarify or add that they did an initial cut of non-responder versus responder.
Oh, yeah.
So even within the 85 people, they identified 51 of them as what they called...
That was the 24 and 27.
Well, 27, 24 was the male-female. They also identified responder versus non-responder. So these were people that had basically less than 2 times the margin of error for MRI results in terms of hypertrophy, which is apparently around 3% change. 51 of them showed up as non-responders,
That's
meaning
a lot.
they couldn't differentiate. That's most of them.
Yeah.
Could not differentiate whether it was just error in the measurement.
Okay.
Another critical factor in study design that most studies I don't see pointing out, measurement error is a huge component
Sure.
of statistical analysis. And in this case, part of what they tested was how did responders versus non-responders, according to their definition,
Not respond.
how much did they respond or not respond based on the 1 set or the 2 set or 4 set protocol? And part of what their conclusion was is that while they had this non-responder versus responder group, they were able to show that the non-responders had more increase in cross-sectional area with more sets with the 4 set group.
Say that one more time. The non-responders had more significant increase in the cross-sectional area
With the 4 set protocol.
with the 4 set. So it still wasn't enough to make them a responder according to what they decided, but they still showed change with 4 sets.
What I was talking about is the responder versus the non-responder was with respect to the 1 set protocol.
Okay.
They had responders and non-responders.
Okay.
So then
That was the filter. Okay.
Right. Then they compared in the 4 set group.
Okay.
Same people. So it's really one group had one
Just
leg,
One leg, yeah.
totally non-responded to the 1 set. 34 had their one leg respond significantly to, or at least measurably to, the 1 set protocol. And then they compared the results also for the 4 set protocol. So even of the 51 that did not respond to the 1 set, they had better response to 4 set protocol.
Got it.
This is where the top headline comes from. Is
More sets
basically
better.
saying more sets are better if you're a non-responder to low volume training.
Wow. That is dropping.
Yeah.
Wow.
Whoa. So
Jeez.
is anything changing in your mental model from this study so far?
It's mostly reaffirming that these articles are just clickbait. Is what I've gotten.
Like, if you had a client that you were only giving 1 set to failure single leg extensions, might you try adding another set?
Of most things. Add so much.
In fact, how many programs do you give your client with only 1 set of any exercise?
The deadlift.
Yeah. 1 mega compound.
Here you go. Here's your 1 set of 5, which is going to be a PR, something you've never done before.
Right. With the heaviest lift that you can do.
Yes. Then you can take a little break after that and do squats.
Right. So I don't know. I'm just not getting excited by this at all, really. It's incredible how much work goes into this. You have results that fit within every other understanding that I have. I mean, the kind of general claim that evidence-based bros will make right now is that volume equated training.
Yeah.
When you equate for volume, you're not really seeing a whole bunch of difference in training. Now, exactly how you articulate or specify the volume, whether it's to failure, like does a set have to go to failure to count as volume, or do you just count total rep sets and tonnage? Or there's a little bit of debate there, but for the most part, increasing volume does seem to correlate with better hypertrophy. But even that, I think there's some debate about, again, what you count volume and where the limit of that is.
Right.
And how well you can test that you're actually pushing yourself to true mechanical failure. Because most of these studies, again, are bros doing fairly high reps at relatively low weight for a very short period of time. So if you're out there and have been lifting for 5, 10, or even a year, trying to take some sort of a conclusion from a study that was run for 10 weeks on 60-year-olds with a unilateral single leg knee extension on 115 grams of protein a day, it just feels like a really big stretch to really take anything meaningful away from this.
Yep. Yeah.
And I certainly wouldn't take the headline away.
No, I would not.
To then decide that, well, because this is where the rubber meets the road. A client might read this headline and come back to me as the coach with a line I hear all the time. I want to focus on hypertrophy. I guess that means I need to start doing longer workouts and more sets.
Well, I think this fits perfectly into the outside's demographic. Outside readers, they do long distance. They do 1,000,000 reps of whatever they're going to do.
Right.
They're endurance hikers, runners, cyclists. They don't want to get stronger.
Right.
And that's what was probably a relief for them to read in the subtitle. It was like,
Right.
oh, okay, I don't have to go to the gym and just do 3 sets of 5. I want to do 5 sets of 15 because
Right.
that
Studies-
fits into
studies
what is
show.
important to me. So I
Right.
think this just fit perfectly into the outside readers'
That's a great point.
frame of
Really,
reality.
really good point. You're going to take a study, you're going to cherry pick a study, feed it to your target audience with a clickbait title. Everybody feels better and validated for doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
And you move on.
Yep.
Now, maybe I'm just being cynical and maybe I'm just doing the same thing and saying and cherry picking studies to support the lower rep, higher intensity model. But I go about it the other way around. My mental model has come probably from personal experience than studies. I let studies influence my mental model, but I tried initially doing strength training at 3 sets of 10. Just talked about it last week. My first squat set,
Right.
all the college football bro stuff, high school stuff was 3 sets of 10. And I maxed out my bench at like whatever it was, 200 pounds.
And our mental model is also really informed by this amazing team of coaches who we work with. We constantly share things that we learn,
Right.
and that's not, a legit scientific study, but you cannot ignore what we learn from actual practicing in the field.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's one of my biggest problems is with the evidence-based crew is that it seems to want to just completely dismiss the evidence of reality.
I think evidence-based really love templates because they can just translate it right onto paper.
Sure.
And
we'll do 8 to 15 of this
Right.
single leg extension to
Yeah.
failure until you think you're done.
Yeah.
Call it good. Change up the exercise. Doesn't matter.
But when you start working with an actual human, you have to move on from that. There are periods of time where that might be exactly what they need, but it's not 3 years.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Anywho.
And I'm not also going to say that the pro science, if you will, or whatever random opinion that I have is the ultimate truth. I will always caveat everything I say that what the individual responds to is probably going to be more dependent on them than my program, which is why I always talk about the individual's program as a study itself. You're testing a hypothesis.
Good way to look at it.
Is this dose of intensity and volume going to work? Oh, if I'm seeing progress, weight on the bar, reps increasing, and I can demonstrate that it's quote unquote working, then I keep doing that.
Yeah.
And
Why would you change it?
And then if that stops working, then we need to go test another variable. Right. We need to test another exercise, another set and rep scheme, and see if we can get in another groove of progress and drive that as far as we can. And it's just, that's what programming has become for me, is constantly testing a hypothesis with that individual to see where we can find these little grooves of progress and just keep pushing it up across the panel of different types of strength or, different exercises or set and rep schemes. Eventually you want to see everything kind of moving up to the right, but it's a constant experiment with that individual.
Well, thank you so much for breaking that down, Andrew. That was really informative.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun. If you had fun, we'd love a review. We'd love a share. Thank you. And we look forward to being back with you next week on Beast Overburdened.
Bye-bye.